including auctions, regulation, competition, price signaling, some game theory topics, even philosophy topics, published in a variety of papers, including Review of Economic Studies, American Economic Review, European Economic Review, essentially all major theory journals, and I think even in Journal of Macroeconomics. So, this had tremendous impact on the profession, both, with papers and with being a kind of co-author as an advisor. And now he co-principal of the large research project supported by European Union and by Russia, jointly with Dewan here at High School of Economics. And so let's welcome Professor Maarten JANSSEN, Christian Wilgen,
Good. I probably should use the microphone, but I'm also happy to talk without a microphone, but maybe if the microphone is necessary, then let's keep it. So this is a paper that I like very much, and I hope after the talk you also like quite a bit. So it's joint work with Santanu Roy, who is in the United States at Southern Methodist University. And it's about a topic that probably you all heard about, which is that firms typically reveal information about the products that they sell, but they might also lie about it. And so in the title, in the program, that's the better title, it's about quality communication. So firms, they have products of different quality. They might try to talk about what quality they have, but they may also lie about the quality that they have. And here are just some examples that pop up. So probably the most famous example is Volkswagen and Dieselgate, where Volkswagen claimed that actually their cars are quite clean and that they pass all kinds of tests, environmental tests, but then it turned out that they knew actually that the cars that they have and the diesel cars that they produce more kind of pollution than they previously admitted. Nike was always somehow very careful about talking about whether they use child labor in their production of shoes. And then in the end it turned out that indeed, maybe not they themselves, but in one of their suppliers, the child labor was involved. Then you might buy goods from sellers who actually do not own the goods. So in my home country, the Netherlands, if you go in Amsterdam, you might every now and then get somebody who wants to sell you a bicycle for 25 euros. And then, of course, you know that this is not really the owner of the bicycle. He stole it and he tries to sell it to somebody else. Facebook claimed that your information is safe with us, but they actually knew that this is not the case, etc., etc. Yeah, so all these things, there are things that consumers care about. Yeah, as a consumer, you might care about whether the product you buy creates environmental damage. You may care about whether in the production process child labor was involved or not. You may care about whether the seller owns the product or not, etc., etc. And so the question then is, how should we think about this? Yeah, and so what is important at this stage that you pick up here is that, first of all, firms, they have private information. And I say here truly private information, meaning it's not only that the consumers do not know, but very often also competitors do not know. Yeah? So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that this really is about what is called experience goods or credence goods. And the distinguishing feature there is that consumers do not really know the quality of the product at the moment they buy it. Yeah, so this is somewhat different from some other goods where once you, at the moment you buy it, you get to know the quality. Here, whether if you bought a Volkswagen, whether actually it creates environmental damage or not, you really don't know at the moment of purchase. Only later you might find out, and so that is another crucial aspect here of this of these cases. Now, of course, in response to some of these cases, or sometimes also already predecessing these cases, the governments try to prevent this, and very often you have laws or regulations that try to make it costly for firms to cheat or to lie about their products. And so here are some cases about the United States, Canada, and Europe, where the regulations make it costly for firms to lie, trying to prevent firms from lying about their true product characteristic. And so when we talk about lying or telling about your products, you may think about all kinds of ways to do this. So advertising might be one way, where you just in an advertisement say, I have a product that has these and these features. You might also think about labels that you put on a product, so that this product contains that or that. You might also think about third-party certification, where you ask another company to certify the quality of your product. But again, there you may also get lying involved, because you might pay that firm or bribe that firm to give a more favorable report than what you really have, etc. So quality communication here is really all kinds of things in which you may try to talk about the quality that you have. Now, this may seem all good, but in this regulation or in this whole debate about policy, some questions I think are somehow forgotten. And it's good to think about whether this regulation is good or bad, or whether lying is good or bad, in connection with these three aspects. So one is that apart from direct communication, consumers may also get information in other ways. So in economics, there's a whole literature on price signaling. On the next slide, I will say a little bit more about it. But so direct communication is not the only way in which consumers may get information from about the product quality. They might get it in other ways. And so it is then interesting to think about how does this regulation, how does this interact with other ways of communication, and in which way will firms then communicate their product qualities. The other aspect that is important is that if you make lying costly, then very often also you make direct communication more costly. So it's very often difficult to only make lying costly, because very often then you also impose costs on other firms. And so you really have to think about what is the cost only for the firms who have low quality, who can lie, and what is the direct cost, the cost for everybody to communicate. And I have also another slide on that in more detail. And finally, one issue that is, I think, very often forgotten, especially also in the academic literature, is that in many of these markets you don't have a monopoly firm, you have actually competition in the market, and this regulation may also affect the way firms compete. And so what I want to do then in this paper is to think about an environment in which firms may signal their information in other ways, not only through direct communication, where there is competition in the market, and where we explicitly make clear what the cost of communication is and what the cost of lying is, and to see how these interact. So first about price signaling. There's not only an academic literature on price signaling, but there's also a practical aspect to it, where consumers are typically quite good in thinking about how price signaling might work. So I already gave you the example of a second-hand bike in Amsterdam. Once you get an offer of 25 euros, you can infer that this bicycle is not owned by the seller. Similarly, if you are offered a Van Gogh painting for 1 million euros, then probably also something is wrong with that painting. And so price signaling is quite pervasive, and here there are some other cases. So experimentally and empirically, you find that price signaling works. So there's actually an interesting study about wine markets where consumers do infer the quality of the wine based on the price. It's also recognized in courts. Yeah, so there was an interesting case where Benckiser, a German chemical firm, produced chemical waste. It sold it to a third party. The price at which they got rid of their chemical waste was so low that actually the court said you should have known that the company that was buying that chemical waste from you was dumping it illegally. And so the third party went bankrupt, and then Benckiser had to pay for the cleanup, the environmental damage of dumping that chemical waste illegally. And so if you think about this, then you realize that price signaling is another way that you may communicate communication, and so therefore you have to really study the interaction between signaling and directly communicating your product quality. Good. Disclosure cost, or the cost of quality communication. So as I said before, if you regulate the way you can communicate as a firm your quality, then very often this is not only affecting the firms that want to lie about it, but it's also affecting the communication of firms that do have good quality. And so one way to think about this is that, say, if you think about financial industries, then there are all kinds of regulations how you may actually communicate quality. So you basically cannot do that directly. You have to ask a third party. But once you have a third party involved, it's simply also costly for firms who actually are financially sound. Yeah, so it's not only that the cost is incurred by firms who want to lie, but there's also a cost for the firms that do not lie. And so we want to study then to what extent is there a difference between if you make it for everybody more costly to communicate, or if you only make it more costly for firms that have low quality to communicate that they are high quality. Yeah. Then finally, competition. Yeah, so one aspect here is that people typically think that once we make it more costly for firms to lie, then that's the end of the story. They will not do that anymore. But this might actually affect really how firms communicate, how firms compete in the market, because as you will see, competition is really working here differently than monopoly markets that are typically studied in the literature. Yeah, so, and in the policy debate also, how this regulation may affect competition is not really studied. It's not part of the impact of the regulation. So these three things I want to then incorporate into the discussion, into an analysis on the effects of how does this regulation of quality communication, how does that work out? Good. Yeah, so the questions that we then want to study are the following. So the first is, what is the role of this communication? If it's really about truly private information, and when you can also signal your quality in other ways. Yeah. If it's costly to make false claims, how will if you increase that cost, how will that affect the way that firms communicate? Will they rely more on price signaling? Will they rely more on direct communication? So how do the firms, and how does this affect the way the firms communicate? What are the welfare consequences? So if you introduce this cost of making false claims, is that a good thing or not? Yeah, so how does that affect welfare? And then especially when firms compete in the market with each other. Yeah. Good. Now, there is of course quite a bit of literature. The paper that is most closely related probably to us is the papers. They are by courts. He basically studies only the monopoly case, but he does also have an informal discussion about how, if you allow for price signaling and making false claims, how that affect the behavior of the monopolist. He doesn't have competition. He doesn't also have a formal analysis of the interaction between price signaling and disclosure, but he at least has a discussion on the issue. If you look at the big literature on quality disclosure, then typically it is assumed that the quality disclosure is truthful. Yeah, so once you disclose something, it is true that the information that you disclose. Whereas here in our paper, the main, of course, thing is that everybody can claim something. It may be more costly for a firm to claim high quality if he produces low quality, but still he can do that. So in our case, the message, the information that you provide may involve lying, whereas in the big literature on quality disclosure, it always has to be the case that the disclosure is truthful. Then there is some recent literature on deceptive advertising, where they basically study what is called pooling equilibria, so equilibria where both high and low quality send the same message, and consumers might be deceived. In that literature, there's a paper by Rhodes and Wilson where they study monopoly, and they rule out price signaling by definition. Yeah, so they don't really look at the interaction. So we have competition and we do have price signaling. There's a paper, there are two papers by these three Italian authors which actually do not have really truly private information. So there it is the case that one firm has high quality and the other firm has low quality, and the only thing is that consumers do not know which firm has high and which firm has low quality. In our case, the firms also do not know it, and it might be that everybody has high, everybody has low, or one has high and one has low quality. And moreover, there is a kind of, what I find at least, a somewhat unusual assumption or strange assumption, which is that the cost of producing high quality is the same as the cost of producing low quality. And so that turns out to be also crucial to get this type of results. And finally, there's a paper by Dewan and co-authors that look at manipulation of product reviews. So there the idea is that if you go on online markets, you have that firms might actually manipulate the kind of information that consumers get through their reviews, and they study then how this affects the products that the consumers buy. So here, this is in a sense somewhat related to us, but again, they have a monopoly set up, and they have a more kind of information, a signaling, jamming story, whereas our story is as you will see, quite different again. Well, let me skip these papers. They are remotely related and not directly related to what we are doing. Yeah, so if there are no further questions at this stage, then I would like to go into somewhat more specifics of what do we exactly then do. Yeah, so as I said, we have competition, and firms have private information about their quality, and they may do two things. They set a price, and they directly communicate, they send a message about their quality, where, as I said before, the message may involve lying, so even low quality firms can say that they have high quality products. Yeah? So we have then competing senders. Yeah? So if you think about the structure of the model that we have, so we have senders and receivers. The firms are the senders. They signal their private information through either price or the quality message. They can send the message whether they have high or low quality. And then we get payoffs, and I will explain, of course, exactly how these payoffs are realized. So there are then two costs to the firms. So there is a direct cost of communication for all firms. So this is D. So this is everybody that communicates, sends a signal, has to pay a cost, which might be zero, but it can also be positive. And then there is an additional cost for firms who lie. So you might think about this as a fine, a regulation, that this makes, for low quality firms, it's more costly to send the message, I'm high quality, than for a high quality firm. Yeah, and so D and F we then think of as partially influenced by regulation and partially influenced by just industry characteristics, how easy or how difficult it is for firms to communicate or to lie about their product characteristics. Yeah? Yeah?
So, guys, please ask questions if you know, during the talk, so don't hesitate to do that.
Good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so don't hesitate if something is unclear. So now we go into maybe a little bit more specific. So then it's good to also ask questions. Okay. So in more detail, what do we do? So we have two firms. Yeah, so that's where the competition is. We have two firms. The products are identical apart from quality. You can have high or low quality. And so each firm knows his own quality, but doesn't know the quality of the other firm, and consumers do not know the quality of either firm. There's constant cost of producing a certain product. And so low quality comes at a lower cost than high quality. So CL stands for the unit cost of production for low quality. CH is the unit cost for high quality. You have a unit mass of identical consumers, and these buy one of the two products. And if they would know the quality, then they value the low quality with VL and the high quality with VH. Yeah, and VH has, of course, it's higher than VL. And then finally, to have an interesting model, of course, consumers have to value the product more than it costs the firms to produce it. So both for low and for high quality, the value is higher than the cost of producing. We look here at a case where high quality is more valuable for society than low quality, or in other words, that if you look at the surplus that is generated from high quality, that is higher than the surplus that is generated from low quality. Yeah, so if there is a low quality and a high quality firm around, from a societal point of view, it would be good that the consumers buy the high quality rather than the low quality. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, so that's all, I think, very simple. At least the model is simple. The analysis is a little bit more involved. So if you think then about communication or disclosure, yeah, so each firm can send then a message of that the product is high quality. And as I said, for the D is the cost for everybody, so that's the direct cost of communication. F is the cost, the additional cost for low quality to send a high quality signal, so that's a fine or simply the additional cost of lying. It might be a bribe if you want to have third-party certification. It might be that you have to pay simply a higher price to a third party to say, hey, can you also tell the consumers that I have high quality instead of low quality? So what is then the kind of structure of the model that we want to analyze? So in the beginning, quality is determined. So in a game theoretic setting, you have then that nature draws the quality of the firm. So with probability alpha, it is high quality. With probability 1 minus alpha, it's low quality. And because we have two firms, then it means that with probability alpha squared, both firms have high quality. With probability 1 minus alpha squared, both have low quality. And with 2 alpha times 1 minus alpha, one has high and one has low quality. Each firm observes their own type, whether they have high or low quality, do not know the quality of the other firm, and they simultaneously choose two things: price and a message, I am high quality. Yeah? They might also choose not to send a message. So what is important here is that price is a continuous variable, so that you might choose any price you like, but the message is binary, so you either send a message or you don't send a message. If you send a message, that means I am high quality, yeah? So that's the message you send, and there might then be a cost involved in sending that message. Now, consumers then observe the prices and the messages. They then update their beliefs about which firm has high and which firm has low quality. It might be that both have low quality, it might be that both have high quality, but it might be that one has high and one has low quality. So they update their beliefs, and then they decide which product to buy. And for which product to buy, they look at the difference between their value for the product, their expected value for the product, and the price that the firm charges. Yeah?
And correctly, firms cannot choose their quality. Is that correct?
That's right. So in the paper, we have an extension where we discuss also quality choice. That turns out to be even more complicated than what we have here.
At this stage, the quality is given.
At this stage, yeah, so you might think about this as, say, farmers, agricultural products, where the quality of the product depends somehow on external circumstances. It's not really influenced here, and you can indeed make it also an active decision of the firms, but here we are more in line with the literature on price signaling, where the quality that you have is somehow given, and then you, the question is whether you reveal it or not. Yep. Good. Okay, yeah, so then the buyers decide where to buy, and then at the end the payoffs are realized. Yeah, if the buyers do not buy from you, your payoff is 0, or negative if you disclosed and they don't buy. If they bought, then of course you can get also a positive payoff depending on the prices you charge. Good. Yeah. So the payoffs then in particular are, for the firms, it's the expected profits, and for the buyers it's simply the expected net surplus, so it's the difference between value and price, where value is then the expected value that they have of buying that product. Okay.
Yeah. So part of it is on the fines.
Yeah.
So, and the fines regulation and possible, when people are, so if I don't buy the product from the false advertisement, can that firm be caught? Or this is just...
if I do not buy?
Yeah, so the firm advertises, that's the false advertisement, but no one, say, because of the price reasons, buy the product from that firm. Would it be penalized?
Okay, yeah, so here we assume that if you communicate, then you have to pay the disclosure cost, but if nobody bought from you, then you don't have to pay the kind of damage that you incur on the consumers.
Yes, so damage only conditional on purchase.
Damage is only conditional on the purchase of the product. Exactly. Okay. Good. Yeah, so we have then the first line is very standard. So this is a game of asymmetric information. So we use perfect Bayesian equilibrium to analyze that. But for those of you who have worked with games of asymmetric information, usually there are many of these perfect Bayesian equilibria. And so what we do here is we impose a very strict refinement concept, which is called the Dewan criterion, which basically rules out many of these equilibria. And in particular, what it rules out is pooling equilibria. So every equilibrium here is a separating equilibrium where consumers will know once the signals are sent, when prices and messages are chosen, the quality of the product. The reason why we do that is for different reasons, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Yeah, so, but what is important then is that we use perfect Bayesian equilibria, and we have a refinement to rule out that there is many equilibria to deal with. Okay. So let me, before I analyze the model, let me give you a few kind of interpretations of this model. Yeah, so as I said already, D and F, we think of them as partly industry-specific and partially dependent on government policies. And so we think of them as, say, suppose they are set in state 0, and we then look at what is the effect of a different value of D and F on the outcome in the market. Yeah, so D may vary across industries, F may vary across industries, and we then look at, for different D and F, what are the equilibrium outcomes in this model. Yeah. The second thing is that what we have here is that disclosure and price communication happens simultaneously. And you might also do that differently. Yeah, so you might think about that disclosure is more a long-term variable rather than that you do that together with price setting. So we have two reasons why we do it, or maybe three reasons why we do it in this way. The first is we really wanted to think about that you can signal in different ways. And if you can signal in different ways, then you really have to do that simultaneously. The second thing is that we have already analyzed the other case where you disclose first through direct communication, and after that you have price setting. So that's a paper in the Economic Journal in 2015. And that actually is a very different setup than what we have here, because if you first disclose and then you set prices, then the price competition depends on what is disclosed and what is not disclosed. And you might then, by disclosing, really affect the nature of the price setting of the firms. Whereas here, because it's simultaneous, the prices do not really depend on the disclosure decisions of yourself or of the other firm. Yeah, so here we really then look at this as which signal do you want to choose, and so disclosure or communication is then also kind of like prices, a kind of short-term thing that you may choose between periods, and you may choose to do that differently. We also can look at the monopoly version, and it turns out that the monopoly version of this model is actually extremely simple to analyze. If you look at the monopoly version, what happens there is basically the following, that if you are a monopolist, of course, you want to set the highest price possible, so that means that low quality will set the price equal to VL, what consumers are willing to pay for VL. High quality will set the price equal to VH, what high quality is willing to, or what consumers are willing to pay for high quality, and to make it such that the low quality firm doesn't want to imitate the high quality price, you get that consumers at the high quality price, VH, buy with a probability which is given by this. Yeah, so what you then need, and that's also later important, you need that the low quality firm doesn't have an incentive to imitate the high quality, and here you can guarantee that by having consumers buying, or a fraction of consumers is buying, and the fraction is then such that it's just not optimal for low quality firms to imitate the high quality price. Yeah, so that's if you have pure price signaling. Now, if you allow for direct communication, you can do the same thing. The prices will not be affected. The only thing that is affected is this probability of buying or the fraction of consumers that buy, because now it also depends on the cost of the low quality firm to imitate the high quality, which is then dependent on D and F. And what you then can show, and that's actually the most important thing here, is that in a monopoly setting, it turns out that the individual and the social incentives are exactly aligned. So basically the firm will disclose or will communicate its quality directly if and only if it's also optimal from a societal point of view. Yeah. So in that sense, the monopoly version is not kind of, I mean, you might think it's interesting, but the firm has the same incentives as it maximizes, in the sense, the social welfare in the market. Yeah. And we'll show then that competition is actually quite different. Yeah. So this is not the case with competition.
Yes, so for pure price signaling, the pooling VL plus VH over 2 equilibrium is ruled out by divinity.
It's ruled out by the Dewan criterion, exactly. So and there the way it works always is that if a firm deviates to a slightly higher price, then consumers infer it's high quality and they want to buy that. Exactly. Yeah, so that's why pooling is ruled out here. Yeah. Okay. Good. So why then do we have this divinity? And you might think about that this is somehow not really good to have it. Basically what it rules out is that you have deception. So the first slide that I had is that firms actually do lie in markets. If we do have our refinement, then this is not really what happens in any of the equilibria that we study. And the reason for this is that the high quality firm has an incentive to set a slightly higher price. Consumers then will realize that this comes from a high quality firm, and this will break kind of the deception or the pooling equilibrium. So, and if you then look at how other papers in this literature, how they get pooling or how they get deception, it's in one or two ways. Either they have that the firms have the same cost, so high quality and low quality are at the same cost. If that is the case, then we can also get pooling, yeah, because if there's no cost difference, then there is also no difference in incentives to set different prices, and therefore we could also get a deception if we allow for the cost being the same. We only think that this is not a very realistic thing to do. The other thing is that we might get pooling by not having this strict refinement. And so if we look at the intuitive criterion, for example, or not impose any refinement, then we can also get pooling equilibria. The reason why we do have this D1 refinement is that actually we want to think about that this regulation not only has maybe the effect that firms will lie less, like the other papers have studied, but we also want to study that actually, even if that is not the case, the regulation still has interesting effects. Yeah, so basically, we want to say that it is interesting to study this regulation, even if the firms do not lie, because it might affect the way they compete with each other. Okay. Good. Yeah, so let's then go to the analysis and think about what can happen in this model. And so what I'll do is I'll first explain to you how price signaling might work here. Yeah? So suppose that we have a version of this model where the firms cannot directly communicate. Yeah? So the only way that they can inform consumers is by price signaling. I will show you how that price signaling then works, and then I will show you in the model where they can communicate, when they will choose not to do so, and when they only will rely on price signaling, and then we look at the other cases. Yeah, so first we think about price signaling. How does it work? And if they can also communicate directly, when will they still not do it and only rely on price signaling? This is actually a paper that I have also with Santanu Roy in Games in Economic Behavior, which then is in a sense a very small subset of the paper that we have currently. So how does it work? So maybe the best way to explain this is by looking at this, this picture. So what happens? So here we have firm 1, and here we have firm 2. Yeah? Both firms can be of high quality or of low quality, and the equilibrium is as follows. And this is the unique equilibrium that satisfies this refinement that I talked about. So high quality firms, they always set a price pH, and I'll tell you exactly what that price will be. Yeah. Low quality firms set lower prices, and actually they randomize over prices. Yeah, so if you want, this model then shows why in kind of markets for illegal products, there's much more price variation than in markets for legal products, yeah, or products where there's no forgery or, around. Why, first of all, do we have randomization for low quality? Well, suppose that you are a low quality firm. Well, let me first explain one other thing. This price difference between pH here, the price that the other firm will set if he is high quality, and the highest price that you will set if you are low quality, this price difference is exactly the quality difference. So what that means is that in a price signaling equilibrium, if one firm is high quality and the other firm is low quality, and consumers see that one firm has this price and another firm has prices over here, then consumers buy low quality, because the price difference is bigger than the value of the quality difference, and so therefore consumers, even though they know that at these prices the quality is low, they still prefer to buy low quality because the price difference is bigger than how they value the products. And so therefore, if you are a low quality firm, why will you not set this price for sure? Well, as a low quality firm, you do not know the quality of the other firm, and therefore you do not know whether the other firm sets a high price or a low price. So there is a probability that there is competition with another low quality firm, and so therefore you have an incentive to undercut over here. But there is also a probability that you have market power in case the other firm has high quality. So therefore the equilibrium is such that the low quality firm kind of randomizes, because there is a probability that you always buy, you have market power, there is a probability that you have to compete, and these two forces go in opposite directions, forcing the low quality firms to randomize over here. Why does the high quality firm not want to randomize and undercut? Well, that's where the out of equilibrium beliefs come in, because that price is such that if you undercut, consumers have to believe that you sell low quality, and if a consumer sees a price that is lower and believes that you have low quality, then basically he will not buy from you, because the other firm either has a high quality and sets this price, and so therefore will buy from that firm, or the other firm has low quality and has a lower price, and therefore also will buy from the other firm. So setting prices in this range is not optimal, because it doesn't lead to any sales, because consumers think at these prices that the quality has to be low. Yeah? So we then get this equilibrium where the high quality has a deterministic price, is prevented from undercutting because of the out of equilibrium beliefs. Out of equilibrium beliefs do not prevent the low quality firms to undercut, because if you have low quality, you cannot get even lower quality than that, and so therefore out of equilibrium beliefs do not really prevent the low quality firm to undercut. Okay, yeah, so this is the unique equilibrium with price signaling. And then what is important is that firms do have market power here, because the low quality firm makes positive profits, because the prices are all above marginal cost. The high quality firm also makes positive profits. And what is important is that there is what we call a consumption distortion, because if one firm has high quality and the other firm has low quality, then the consumers buy low quality, and this is inefficient from a social welfare point of view. Yeah, so there is an inefficiency involved here, namely that if both qualities are around, consumers buy low quality even when they know that this is low quality, because the price difference is such that the consumers prefer to buy low quality at a much lower price than to buy high quality. And this is inefficient from a social welfare point of view. Yeah? Okay, so that was basically on this, this slide. Yeah, so there's considerable market power, and you need to have this market power, especially to prevent the low quality firm to imitate the high quality firm. And there is this consumption distortion. Consumers buy the wrong quality if both low and high quality are around. Okay. Good. When does this equilibrium exist, this price signaling, in case the consumers can actually also communicate directly? Yeah, so let's look at the bigger model where they can also communicate directly. And there it's actually easy to see that the following is true. Yeah, so if we look at the picture where we have the direct cost of disclosing for all the firms on the vertical axis, the cost of false disclosure, or the fine, on the horizontal axis, then what we can show is actually that above this bold line, or to the left of this line, there you always get pure price signaling, even if you can't communicate directly. Now, I think this is relatively easy to understand, because what this basically says is the following. If the cost of direct communication is high, you don't want to do it. Yeah, so that seems very obvious, because if the cost is relatively high, why would you do it if you can also rely on other ways of signaling your product? Yeah, so that's one thing. If D is very high, nobody wants to engage in it. The other thing is that if F is very small, that means if it's almost as costly for low quality firms as for high quality firms to use direct communication, then of course direct communication will not be used because it's costly. You cannot differentiate yourself really with the other firm, because the cost for the other firm is almost the same as for you, and so therefore you rather also here rely on price signaling than on direct communication. Yeah, so basically, if F is relatively small and or if D is relatively high, you don't really want to rely on direct communication, and there you get price signaling. Yeah? And so what we then will do is to think about, okay, if in this region you have pure price signaling, what happens now if you introduce regulation? Yeah, so basically, what happens, especially over here first, suppose the cost of direct communication is relatively small, what will happen if you increase the cost of false communication, and you get then probably some direct communication. Is that good or bad? And how does it depend on how much you increase F, the cost of lying? Yeah? Okay. Now we have different types of equilibria with direct communication. And I will mainly focus on the first type, but there is also the second type. So the first type is equilibria where the high quality firm will always directly communicate. Yeah, so that's what we call pure disclosure. And then there are also equilibria where the high quality firm randomizes between direct disclosure and no disclosure, and that we call mixed disclosure equilibria. Yeah? And the two are in the parameter range like this. So below the red line we have pure disclosure. Yeah, so these are equilibria where the high quality firm always wants to disclose. Above that red line you have mixed disclosure. And what I want to do is to first explain to you what happens in this region, because that's the easiest to understand. Okay, so let me tell you first what happens basically in this region. Yeah, so what I will do is I will gradually go through this parameter range and just tell you first what happens over here when you have a higher fine, but it's still not very high. Yeah, it's high enough to get that the high quality firms disclose, but it's not very high yet, and I'll explain to you what the difference is. Okay, so what happens here? Suppose that you have this fine, but the fine is still not very high. So then basically you have, roughly speaking, the same equilibria as we had before. Namely, high quality firms set a high price, but now the high price comes together with a message, I am high quality. Yeah? The low quality firms still randomize, and it's still the case that the low quality firm sells the product even though high quality firms are around. Yeah? So in that sense, disclosure doesn't really get rid of the consumption distortion, because it's still the case that if one firm is high and the other firm is low quality, consumers purposefully buy low quality because of the price difference. So that inefficiency you don't get rid of. On top now you have another inefficiency, namely firms spend money on disclosure, but it doesn't really affect anything. Yeah, in terms of consumers still buy the same quality as they did before. So therefore, in this case, the fine makes things worse, because the only thing that it really does, it makes that the high quality firms disclose, but it doesn't really affect the decisions of consumers. And so therefore, if both firms are high quality, consumers buy from them and the firms spend this disclosure cost without affecting the market outcome. So in that sense, this is more inefficient than pure price signaling. The only thing that really changes is that the prices themselves, they are lower. Why are the prices lower? Because if the prices would be the same, then because of the higher F, the higher fine, it will be optimal for the firms to undercut. And because of the fine, now firms, high quality firms will have an incentive to lower the prices up to a moment where, again, the same kind of conclusion holds. So what you get is you get more competitive pricing. Yeah, so prices will be lower, but all the prices will be lower, not affecting the consumption decisions of the consumers, and therefore only increasing the inefficiency. We have an extension of the model where we allow for some downward sloping demand. So here the inefficiency remains the same because we have unit demand. Which, if you have a kind of some extension where the demand is also partly downward sloping, this result continues still to be true, although it's more difficult to get it. Yeah, so what is important then is in this region over here, qualitatively you get the same conclusion. The only thing is that the prices all will be somewhat lower. You get an additional inefficiency because of the disclosure cost that is paid without affecting the prices. Okay, and so that's the first thing. Now, if you increase F further, yeah, so basically if you now are not here, but you are here, then you might see what will happen, because if the prices get lower, at some point the low quality prices will be equal to the low quality marginal cost. Yeah? So that's what happens when F is in an intermediate region. And in that case, what happens is that the low quality firm sets a price equal to marginal cost. The high quality firm sets a price equal to CL plus delta V. And consumers now randomize between buying high quality and low quality when both are around. Yeah, so that's for the intermediate range of parameters. You get more competition, but it's still the case that the high quality firm doesn't want to undercut because the F is not big enough. Yeah, the cost or the fine for lying is not yet big enough, so therefore you get this, this type of equilibrium. Then when the cost becomes very high, the cost of lying, yeah, so if you are really over here, then if you see disclosure, you know for sure this cannot be from a low quality firm because the fine to, if he sells, the fine will be so high that nobody wants to, no low quality firm wants ever to disclose. And so therefore you get then this, this situation where now it is the high quality firm that randomizes, the low quality firm sets this, this price, and this from a social point of view is now the most optimal thing to have, namely the highest price that the high quality will set is such that it is the value difference between low and high quality, and so therefore if there is one firm that is high quality and the other firm that has low quality, then actually the consumers buy high quality now because with probability 1 the firms set prices in this region, and then if one firm is high and the other firm is low quality, consumers buy from the high quality firm. And so from a social point of view, this is the most optimal to have. And so to summarize then that this part, what we then have is that the disclosure cost, sorry, if you increase the fine, the cost of lying, then total welfare is non-monotonic in F. And so if you make a picture with F on the horizontal axis and welfare on the vertical axis, then first welfare is going down because you only get a cost of disclosure on top of the consumption distortion as inefficiencies, but then welfare is going up again because the consumption distortion is gone. The disclosure cost here is still relatively low, and for very high F, you get a socially efficient situation. Here, welfare is higher than under no disclosure or under pure price signaling. Yeah, so the lesson then is, for this part, that if the disclosure cost itself is relatively low, what you want is to have either a very high fine, or if that is not possible, no fine at all, but the intermediate situation is actually, from a welfare point of view, the most inefficient. Yeah? So either you want to be here or there. This is, in a sense, better if you are able to indeed impose a very high fine. Good.
So, so what do you do with 25 euro bikes here?
The 25 euro bikes?
Yes.
Yeah, so, oh, sorry. So the question there is, what is the fine?
Yeah.
It's not very high, I must say, unfortunately. And of course, this, I mean, I didn't yet tell that yet, but this is the expected fine. Yeah, so it's of course, it's the expected cost of doing it. So if the chance of being caught is very low, which is also the case, then we are probably somewhere in this region, and that's the most inefficient thing to have. Yeah. Okay, good. So let me then briefly talk about this this region. Yeah, so the region where the disclosure cost itself is higher. So what do we get there? Sorry. What do we get there? There we get that it's always optimal not to have any fine. The reason for that is the following. The direct cost of communication is relatively high, and so therefore it's too high for high quality firms to always disclose. If they always disclose, the market becomes so competitive that this is not optimal for them, because then they cannot get their disclosure cost back. So if they disclose, they will do that with a probability less than 1. That means also that you can never get fully around the fact that there is a consumption distortion, because if they don't really, if sometimes they don't disclose, then the consumers will sometimes rely on price signaling, and so therefore you don't get really around the consumption distortion. The other thing that you have is that by covering the direct communication costs, the high quality firms has to sell relatively, has to set relatively high prices, and so therefore you can only get around that by allowing also the low quality firms to get some rent. And so therefore what you get is the consumption distortion remains there for some, at least with a positive probability. Moreover, once you have disclosure, it's relatively costly, and it's too costly to offset the consumption distortion. So in this region, it's better actually not to have any regulation, because the regulation doesn't really get rid of the problem entirely, and if it gets rid of the problem, it's simply associated with a high cost for the firms. So what we then have is, in this intermediate region, is a monotonicity, namely welfare is always decreasing in the cost of lying, and so therefore it's better to be over here. Yeah, so what then is important is that you may think it's always good to have a fine, and if you have a fine, a very high fine, and we have then two lessons that are going in a somewhat opposite direction. The first is that if the direct communication cost is low, then it may be that a very high fine is optimal, but it really should be very high, because intermediate fines are not optimal. The other thing is that if the direct communication cost is relatively high, then no fine is actually the optimal thing, because even if here you sometimes can get around the consumption distortion, you don't get always around it, and moreover, once you get around it, it comes at a very high cost of disclosure, and that is not optimal because of this cost. Yeah, so it means then that whether a high fine is optimal really depends on the disclosure cost itself. And so that is then very different also with the monopoly case, because in the monopoly case, individual incentives and social incentives go in the same direction, whereas here with competition that is not the case. Yeah, so it might be with competition that where it is optimal. Okay. Good. Go to the conclusion. Yeah, so the intermediate case is always worse. Yeah, so that might be optimal from a social point of view, but only if the it costly for high quality, for low quality firms to situation where you are better off not imposing any regulation. So we also in the paper look at what happens to the profits of the firms, because the profits of the firms might be an indication of whether they want to lobby against the regulation or not. And then one interesting aspect also is that high-quality firms, their profits for a large range of the parameters go in the same direction as social welfare. So, so high-quality firms, when they lobby against it, then you might have an indication that actually it is not, from a social welfare point of view, also an optimal thing to have. If the high-quality firms are fine with it, then it is also an indication that it might be good for social welfare. Okay, let me stop there.
So, Maarten, thank you.
Yeah.
So, if you have any questions or comments, please. I think we'll, do it at the end. So,
Yeah, good.
Now, okay. Now, but please, any kind of questions. So, first, let me comment and then ask questions. So, I think, I hope, or actually, it's always a pleasure to listen to Maarten presenting, and so you saw from in the picture you saw the art of economic theory, and this is kind of part of the profession, but it's actually requires lots of kind of thinking, kind of design into how you construct the model, what kind of assumptions, so that you're able to solve it. It's reasonably modeling the situation at hand, and you can draw reasonable and valuable conclusions. And you saw the combination of these things. So this is, I think, is really kind of it's beautiful. Even it's not just valuable. If I may ask you something on the last part is in terms of lobbying. Mm-hmm. We would not expect any, in some sense, low-quality firms would never lobby.
Low-quality firms. So let me, if I go through this picture. So in this region, over here, the profits of the firms, of both the low and the high quality firms, are going down. Yeah, because all the prices go down. And so therefore, here, both, if they could both lobby, both the low and the high quality firms are against this regulation. And here is also the region where, from a social welfare point of view, you get the lowest possible welfare that is generated. If you go to this direction, in this direction, here, of course, the low-quality firms will always be against it, because here the prices are so low that they don't make any profits. The price is equal to marginal cost. The high-quality firms actually take over the market here, and so from high-quality firms here are again better off. So in this region, the incentives of low and high-quality firms go in the same direction, namely both don't want this regulation. Here they diverge, because the low-quality firm is really still against it, whereas the high-quality firm likes this type of regulation. And so therefore, you might also have low-quality firms that lobby. And of course, from the point why we don't want to emphasize the lobbying aspect too much is that from a regulator's point of view, you may not know whether the firm is low quality or high quality. And so therefore, a low quality firm will always lobby against it, even though it is optimal from a social point of view. Whereas from the high quality firm, he may have also an incentive to... So if you have two firms and one says it's good and the other firm says it's not good, then you might actually have an indication that you are in this region where it is optimal to have it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Questions, comments? Yes, please.
Could you please clarify one more time?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about the situation where it is pure disclosure fine is high.
Yeah.
Why would consumers prefer to buy from high quality companies than lower quality companies? Because we were talking about first at the beginning that consumers prefer lower quality companies. Like, well, I mean, when the fine is low or when the fine is in the middle, they kind of like prefer lower quality companies to the high quality companies. And then we have this shift when the fine is high. So could you please clarify one more time
Exactly.
why they choose it?
Yeah, good. That's a very good question. So let me start with this picture. So this was the region where the fine is intermediate. Yeah? And here I said the following, that the high quality firm will set a high price, the low quality firm will randomize, and the low quality firm will randomize over a set of prices that are such that the highest price that they will choose is still the quality difference lower, or the value of the quality difference lower than the high quality firm. Yeah? So what the consumers want to do is they infer which quality it is from the price and or the message. They then think, which quality do I want to buy, depending on the expected value and the price difference. Yeah? So here, in this situation, if they see one high price, PH, and one low price, then they know at this low price I buy low quality, at the high price I buy high quality. So they, in a sense, infer correctly the quality, but the price difference is so high that even though they prefer high quality, it is offset by the lower price. And so therefore here they buy low quality because the price difference is bigger than the value difference they have for the high and the low quality. So what I then also said is that if you compare this situation with the situation where you have pure price signaling, then all the prices will be lower, because what does the fine do? It basically does the following. If the high quality firm will set a slightly lower price, if the fine is already somewhat higher, then the consumers will know such a price will not be set by a low quality firm. Therefore, the high quality firm has an incentive to undercut, to set a lower price. And so therefore, this mechanism makes that with the fine, prices will tend to fall. Yeah? So, but if the prices tend to fall, these prices will also tend to fall. Everything will fall. Yeah? So what I then said is that at an intermediate level, you might have that the prices fall to such an extent that the low quality firm charges price at marginal cost. And then in the intermediate region, the high quality firm still sets prices here. But if you then increase the fine even further, then even here, prices, if you undercut prices here, again, if the fine is very high, then even the low quality firm doesn't want to set such a price. So again, consumers will infer these prices come from high quality. So then when the fine becomes very high, you get a situation like this, where the low quality firm set price equal to marginal cost. The high quality firm starts randomizing, where now the difference between this price, the marginal cost of the low quality firm, and the highest price that high quality will set, is again this delta V. That means that if the high quality will set prices over here, then consumers say, well, this is a high quality firm, this is a low quality firm, the price difference now is smaller than delta V, and therefore, even though I know that this is high quality and this is low quality, now the price difference is smaller than the value of the quality difference, and therefore the consumers buy high quality now rather than low quality.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Now it's
Yeah?
clear.
Yeah? Okay, thank you.
Other questions and comments? And so I think even with this question, you see that there's a combination of things that, if you return to the very first kind of set of all the results, what will happen if there's just pure price competition, then you see kind of on those markets, those type of markets with the monopolistic duopoly, you have kind of a hidden competition between low quality and high quality firms, and that competition is kind of won in a way by low quality firms, because low quality sell at their preferred terms, and the high quality, kind of residual claimant in a way. And so that shows here in the competition with low F and low disclosure cost is that, hey, all the kind of the gains are reaped by low quality firms, more or less. If there's on the market high quality and low quality firm, then low quality firms sell for sure, and the high quality firms are kind of residual claimants. That said, now, and that's, what happens if you increase F, then you start to affect these markets. And, one effect in the background is that, hey, you make kind of higher quasi-market power to high-quality firm. At the end, increasing F too high, you lead to the competition, to the story where high-quality firms will be able kind of to sell on their own. And, you don't put this advantage, you remove the advantage of low-quality firms in terms of, kind of information. But through that process, there's a big story in the background to kind of take care of that. And at low F, this is, this the low quality eat a little bit in their profits, but the high quality firms is on the edge. While high quality firms compete with price, which actually will drive low quality firms almost, in the combination of these things kind of matters significantly, and that's what matters. The one thing that, so it's a little bit kind of endogenous choice of quality, kind of hinted type of thing. What might, how the conclusion?
Okay, so if you have indeed endogenous quality choice,